Good evening, everyone. This is the last talk of today, and I'm going to talk about building a scalable API with Grails. So what can you expect from this talk? Surprise? Yeah, story about creating an API on Grails. I'm going to talk about the decisions we made on every step and the reasons behind them, and the pitfalls we encounter. And yeah, it's a process where we learn as we go. So about me, my name is Tanausú Cerdeña. I have a strong sysadmin background. I've been a Grails user for 2 years, and I'm co-founder and the CTO of Geosophic. So just to put you in some context, we are a startup. We are between Amsterdam and Tenerife, and what we do at Geosophic is we offer online services for mobile games. Basically, 3 groups of them. Gaming features like leaderboards allow them to send a score like in Game Center and so on. We allow them to data tracking in the same way as Flurry and so on. Game developers want to know at which levels are the gamers leaving their games and so on. And we help them to monetize their games. We use performance at serving. The API we built is only focused on the first two. So why did we choose Grails? First reason, productivity. We have a Java background, and Geosophic started just as an MVP. We wanted to validate the business model as a minimum viable product, if you don't know the letters. And yeah, it's fun to use. I mean, we, the developers, are more happy to use Grails instead of other platforms. The development environment we're using is Grails 2.1, Groovy 1.8. We use STS and Vim sometimes. We are trying to move to IntelliJ, thanks to the Doomsday offer. We deploy to Amazon Web Service. We use Elastic Beanstalk, and we have a team of 3 developers. I'm the one who is working on the backend. We have a front-end girl and one mobile guy. But yeah, we try that everyone touches everything because we don't want to, be killed like by a bus and so on. The overview of the architecture, just some context. We have built all the web application in Grails. We have separated the couple as much as possible, the dashboard for the developers and the API for the mobiles. It's an HTTP API, and we have built some SDKs for the mobile platforms, just simple wrappers on the API. For storage, we use MySQL. We are thinking to change, and we use Redis for a couple of things I will explain later. So our API controllers, we try to make them as lightweight as possible. Just only validate the parameters, just call the services, all the business logic is in the services, and compose the responses. This is a simple example. We use Grails command, and we validate and we compose. So to the IP design, when we decided to start, we went through a top-down process follow. We sit down for some days. We wanted to do this especially right because when you design an API, you want to make it as stable as possible from the beginning, but that's impossible. I mean, something is going to change, a requirement at some point. So we want to make it stable but extensible as well. And also what happens in the mobile environment connected to APIs is that mobile users don't update as much often as other users. If your API is connected to another server or so, then they will update. But when you have a mobile connected to API, maybe some users will update, maybe some not. So when going through the design, we have to decide about the URL schema we were going to use, if we were going to use a fully REST API, about the response format we were going to use, and decide about the versioning and authentication. So the URL schema, we decided to follow this one, the base URL, then the version, first controversial decision, the feature, we have 4 features there, the items, and the action, which is optional. So some examples, we have, for example, a feature which is the leaderboards, where a user can update, submit a score and see the leaderboards and so on. And also we allow the developers to track event. So, and when designing to the versioning option, as I said, this is one of the most controversial ways. The options we have, yeah, we can include the version in the URL path. We can put it as a parameter. Some people are using a custom header or version and media types. We decided to go with the first one. And why? Because we wanted that the clients were aware of that they were using a specific version, no change at all. Yeah, this is more clean, I think, but for our specific case, I was just deciding between one of those. We could use some people use the date of the build as version, but we don't really want to change our API so often. So when we build all in the version 1, when we add new features for the version 1, we always want to do it backwards compatible. So some issues we discover. Yeah, what happens? Yeah, it's super cool. We have different versions for different APIs, but we have a scarcity of resources. What will happen when we have to change to update the version? Will we keep both systems? So will we handle both versions in the same application, in the same WAR? That's something for the future for us. As I said, we wanted to make every change in the same version to be backward compatible. So every addition we add to the API must not break the previous installations. And so, you guess what? Our first client deployed, and a week later we had to make a change on the API. So we say, okay, let's change the version, let's not. What we did was kind of a patch, and we added an interceptor to just, it was just a change in the name of the parameters. And we say, okay, we don't have that much traffic yet. He's just starting. He's going to do an update, but he has some live clients. So we just put an interceptor for a while, change the name of the parameters, and then we removed when we were sure that all the clients were on the new version. So going to the HTTP methods, our API model, it doesn't match exactly with CRUD, with objects, with domain models. So it's not fully REST, but we try to use the get method to retrieve info in general, and to use the post to submitting scores, to submitting info. So in Grails, how do we implement this? We would love to have a more general rule in the URL mappings to just match all the API controllers and methods, but we had to do some splits when we come to the actions and so on. That the same actions can handle a get or a post HTTP method. Then we went to the response format. We decided to go JSON, no XML. We control more or less the clients, the wrappers, the SDK in the mobile, so we don't have to support two versions. And the general format, we actually copied it from Foursquare. It's the one we like the most. It has three main sections and meta sections where you have all the meta information that the client can know. Another controversial decision is to put the HTTP status code of the request within the JSON response. Actually, we do return HTTP status codes as usual. Some people say, okay, you just return 200 code and then the client handles it, but we decided to do it the two ways. And the response is dependent on every specific endpoint. This is how do we compose the response? We created some Groovy plain objects that actually matches what we want to do to return. And yeah, we use the magical render as JSON from Grails, Groovy. But it's not as simple as that. We have to build our own custom JSON marshallers, because for some classes, if we want to return some domain classes, yes, we want to not include the class type, the ID, and so on. And for some other, we want to do some transformations. For example, it's a custom marshaller for the leaderboard. And for the date, we want to, in our API responses, to put the day as milliseconds from the epoch. So we just do a get time. So we have about 5 API controllers. We have a lot of common code in them. Yeah, we could put all the endpoints in one controller, but it would be too big and not clean at all. So how do we put all that common code in one place? So it's, for example, the authentication, the usage tracking for the API, and the common parameters validation. We decided to use the mix in Groovy. Another choices we have was to put the extension, but that was not a choice for us. So we find this very comfortable. And for every, this is a specific example of a controller. So it's a mix with a class API controller that we'll show later. And for every controller, we put a before interceptor that performs a specific set of actions, including the authentication, and that's another controversial one. This is an example of the intercept before in the API controller. Yeah. Why did we put the authentication there? Because we could have put it on a filter. It's maybe a better way, but we decided to put all the specific API stuff in the same place. So maybe we change this later, but for now it's working for us. And also in the API controller we have some helper methods to build default responses, default error responses, and so on. The main mixing issue we found is the reloading. When you are in developer mode, yeah, you can reload a mixing the API controller, but all the Groovy, the other controllers that use that, don't get reloaded automatically. Authentication, we don't have a very risky area. I mean, yeah, some people get upset if you submit a fake score, so we have to protect about that. And we decided to go with a pair of consumer key, consumer secret for every client. We use the consumer key to identify the client, and we use the consumer secret to sign the request, as the same as Alberto were doing. This is sort of two-leg OAuth. We looked for some Grails plugins there, but we didn't find. Yeah, we found an old one, but we think this is a very useful one. So we are feeling more confident about this. So we would like to contribute at some moment. Yeah, so this is also a question I do have. It should be better maybe to use Spring Security. Yeah, Spring Security has the three-leg OAuth, but we don't authenticate the end user, we just authenticate the client. So it's kind of overkilling for us. But I think it should be the way that we should do this in the future. And how do we handle errors? We had to build an error controller, because just for the 500 errors, just to return the JSON response. Our API, this is one thing I didn't say, is we return, for example, just one endpoint has a response in HTML when we are showing a view of the leaderboard, but that's not the main point. And how do we measure the API usage? Also in the before interceptor, we have a policy of fire and forget. I mean, the end user doesn't want to spend time for us just writing to the database, doing some computations there. So that can fail, but also our policy is that the end user must not know too much when something fails. Only in the specific request he does to submit a score and so on. And yeah, we store that in MySQL. And then we have a worker in background doing the calculations and so on to compute the metrics. And now we are moving to Redis. And also we are evaluating Cube, a tool by Square. It's based on MongoDB. And this is kind of the Dragabi. This is one thing we really want to improve. We want to track also the parameters, because we want to get some semantic. We could just track down all the URL itself and so on, but we want to have the semantics of some parameters at the metrics at some time. So yeah, we do a binding with the commands and so on. That's also repeated in some API controllers, so this is something that we are looking how to improve it. How do we do the testing here? Yeah, so they are really simple controllers, lightweight controllers. So we test them as any other. And then the heavy business logic, we just text them. Yeah, a trick is to include the mixing in the setup of the text. Otherwise, you will get into troubles getting some methods. Yeah, that a simple test. Checking the response on some invalid parameters. Now to the performance considerations, we found, I was really worried about Grails being a dynamic language and Groovy being a dynamic language and not able to handle that much, but I actually quite surprised it. And yeah, we don't have the overhead of having the GSP, and so we try to do all the asynchronous, all the tracking activity asynchronously. That helps a lot. And it's difficult to cache for us, except for the leaderboard, because almost every call is specific for the user, and they don't usually request the same information twice. But the leaderboards, yeah, they are sort of common in specific areas. We cache those in the service. Some performance figures we have found out. We are running this on one SC2 small instance using Elastic Beanstalk. We have on the same web application, the API, plus the services, plus the dashboard. They are decoupled, so when we grow big enough, we will move them to different wards. We have now 90,000 users, 7,000 daily active of them. And the throughput we are seeing is 75 requests per minute on average. We have a lot of customers from the USA, so it's really seasonal during the day. Peaks of 200 requests per minute, and the server response time is quite fast, but also the latency sometimes is not that good. And the performance test we have run on this machine has shown that we can go up to 450 requests per minute with no overhead. The bottlenecks, yeah, the database, of course. We are using MySQL. We are getting to the point that we really should move some data from. So we are moving Redis for the big amount of data to read. For the gaming features, the leaderboards, they are the most accessed way. The tracking activity, we don't really need to put it on Redis because it's processed afterwards. And yeah, we are checking that for the metrics storage to see the daily active user, weekly active users, to filter by location and so on. And the next step we want to do, we want to improve the usage tracking. We want to use Spock. We are not using Spock. I think it's a must. And see what we can contribute to the community. And also, we are looking for a nice log viewer. I don't know if you really know one, because we have a lot of logs. And I want to search really to filter by. So thank you. That was quick, but have any questions or suggestions? Yeah.
Why did you go for mixins in your controllers? What did you get out of it? Like, why that decision?
It was for cleanliness of code. We had all the common code in the mixing. So the other options, I don't know if there are more, but extension, which wasn't quite.
You could extend from a base class, or you could use delegate annotation. Like, I'm asking because the fact that you have the problem in your test when you have to reapply the mixin annotation, I don't know if I would use mixins because it's metaprogramming in my production codes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's something I'm fine with doing it in tests, but I have this view that it's not safe. I don't know why, but I don't know. I personally would not put that.
Okay, we'll check the delegate soon.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Check the delegate because it works basically as mixin, but it's compile time. It's an AST transformation, so it's older and you don't have problems, for example, in the tests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else? No?
How did you manage to distribute the private and public keys to the clients?
That's also a security issue. I mean, they connect when a developer wants to connect to our service. He just creates an account, and for every game he creates, he has a pair of keys. So he has to, in the SDK we give to him, he has a properties file when he put these two keys. So that's a security problem because you are putting them on a mobile device, not on the client server, and so a lot of people are going to access that. So it's almost as safe as for a really skilled hacker that just to put a consumer key, just to use one and not sign the request. So it's over. Well, thank you very much, guys.